All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick are going to be looking at the Alabama football spring preview. Practice gets going underway for teams all across America here this month. Last year, I picked Alabama to win the national championship, um, and they got to the national championship, came up a little bit short. But the reasons I thought they would get there didn't exactly hold true, and it's going to start with this offensive line, Nick. You know, they're ranked outside the top 120 nationally in sacks and tackles for loss allowed. Of course, they replaced, I'm pretty sure it was 4 starters. Evan Neal's the only one coming back. Now he's gone. Chris Owens is also gone. What do you expect out of this offensive line? A lot of young guys up front, including both guards coming back, though. Emil Ikior, Javian Cohen. Very excited for the potential of this unit. Not a great part of their football team from last year, though.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned with the offensive line. Of course, Eric Wolford, the coach that they just hired away from Kentucky, I think will help a lot with that. He had a really great offensive line at Kentucky. They were really strong in protecting the running backs there. They were able to get a ton of carries at Kentucky this year. They ran the ball heavily. So I think him stepping in and coaching this spring will really help and kind of help grow some of those guys who, had a bit of a disappointing year last year. There's a lot of question marks. You lose Evan Neal, who was just a really strong tackle. He's going to be the number one overall pick in the draft, most likely. If not, he's not going to get out of the top five. He really protected Bryce on that side of the line. So I definitely worry about it a little bit, but I think Bryce Young will also kind of develop and not need as much time as he needed last year. He was still a bit young, getting used to it. So the offensive line might not play a big of a role next year, just simply because he's going to be more comfortable. I think he'll be able to create plays a little bit faster. Not that he was slow or anything like that, but I don't think it's going to be as big of a question mark next year. Of course, it's going to be interesting to see how these guys develop throughout the season. I think they got a little bit better as the season went on. Definitely that Georgia game looked strong. I'm talking about the SC game. And there was towards the end of the Auburn game, they looked a little bit better on the offensive line, but there's definitely a ton of question marks this year.
Well, they looked better at times, but overall in that game against Auburn, they were horrible. They gave up 11 tackles for loss. On that last drive, they were superb. Everyone on the offense was. They sent it to overtime, and then in the
Yeah.
extra period, they were pretty good. But overall, they were terrible against Auburn. And then the next week, I turned around and picked them to beat Georgia in the SEC title game. I got so much scrutiny for that, but I just knew that Nick Saban was not going to allow that to happen 2 weeks in a row, especially in the biggest game of the year, to his offensive line. Two guys I was very interested in last year, J.C. Latham, Tommy Brockmeyer, two top 5 ranked recruits from last year's class. They didn't see the field one bit, really. I think those guys are going to factor in a good bit. Do you think we're going to see them both start at tackle, or do you think Damian George will take over that right tackle spot and those two former 5 stars will compete for the left side?
Yeah, so I think Brockmeyer will probably get the left side, and I think, like you said, Damian George will take the right side next year. I think Brockmeyer showed a little bit in practice from what I've heard, and a little bit. He didn't get a lot of game time. Neither of the freshmen, the high recruits, did. I think Brockmeyer has the higher potential of the two, and I think Damian George will be a good fit on that right side.
I think they're pretty stout at center. Chris Owens, he kind of he moved around a good bit on the offensive line. I thought he'd be a strong center, being a veteran coming back. And, that wasn't exactly true. Seth McLaughlin and Darian Dalcourt, 2 veterans, will take over that center position. See what we can get out of them. Of course, James Brockmeyer might even compete for there, Tommy's brother. This offensive line is obviously going to be an interesting unit. There's no way they can be any worse than they were last year, though, even though they're losing a top 3 pick in the draft. The run game, though, also kind of suffered. Brian Robinson was very happy that he came back for his senior year at a 1,300-yard season. But there was games where he wasn't effective, like against LSU. I believe they had a net 1 rushing yard. I think they might have been in the negative. Yeah, I mean,
it ended up at 1. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were not good whatsoever at times. I'm kind of shocked that he had 1,300 plus yards, but this running game really suffered at times, and Bryce Young really had to carry the offense. We'll get to the Heisman winner here in a minute. I love the group of running backs they have, though. Jahmyr Gibbs, he'd be one of my Heisman front runners if it wasn't for being in a crowded backfield with Jace McClellan, Trey Sanders. Gibbs, though, this guy's incredibly versatile coming over from Georgia Tech. He was a high-end recruit coming out of high school. He can do a lot for you as an explosive runner. He's pretty physical. He can make an impact as a receiver. He's got a kick return touchdown, I think, or a long kick return. I don't know if he has a touchdown to his resume, but he can make an impact on special teams. Is this running game going to get any better, even if the offensive line doesn't show much progress?
So I think Gibbs is the wild card here. He had a really strong year at Georgia Tech, kind of stood out in what was a pretty poor Georgia Tech team. If he can kind of come in and hit the ground running, literally and figuratively, I think he can have a really strong year. I like Jace McClellan a lot. There's some people in Tuscaloosa who are not really a fan of him. They had some question marks about him. He didn't have the best year, kind of showing up sometimes when Brian Robinson wasn't taking carries.
Well, he was injured too.
Injured as well, yeah. So I think Chase McClellan has a strong potential to be the number 1 back, and then Gibbs might have to take over that role late in the season, might beat him out for that role. But I think picking up a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs in the transfer portal is just another reason why Nick Saban is kind of adapting with the modern game. You know, someone like him, you kind of would think that an older coach, someone that's been around for a while, wouldn't want to go to the portal and pick players up like this, but he's kind of adapted it. You saw with Jameson Williams last year. I think picking up Jahmyr Gibbs was an absolute must pick up. We're going to talk about a wide receiver as well that they had to pick up in the portal. Getting a guy like Gibbs in there to kind of be an extra back in the room, it forced a couple guys to step out, a couple guys had to transfer away, which happens when you pick up so many guys like that in the portal. People are bound to leave. But I think Jahmyr Gibbs has real potential here. He could be great on special teams. I don't know if I want him on special teams necessarily. I get concerned about injuries on special teams every year. You never know what's going to happen on special teams. You could get someone injured. But Jahmyr Gibbs could really add something to this team. He had a strong year at Georgia Tech, and I like the pickup from the portal.
Yeah, I did an article, top 10 impact transfers, because we're kind of at the end of the cycle here. And Gibbs was on there, and I put at the end of the paragraph, I was like, they didn't need him, but they wanted him, and you're going to find out why. Gibbs is going to be a stud. He was already schooling people in practice as soon as he arrived, according to some reports. There's only three major guys they got from the portal, but they're all big time players. There's one on the defense we'll get to. The other one we're alluding to is Jermaine Burton. A lot of vertical speed coming in. I don't think he's going to have a Jameson Williams type season, but I do think he will be the leading receiver. I think you'll see an 800 to 1,000 yard type season from Jermaine Burton. This receiving core, I don't really know how to feel about them. They got big time recruits coming in: Kobe Pretensi, Shaz Preston, Aaron Anderson. Those are some freshmen that might have to step up. Ja'Cory Brooks, though, and Ajayi Hall, national championship, they are pretty disappointing. One of my friends after the game was like, I didn't think Bryce had that big of a game. And I was like, I heavily disagree. His receivers just did not make plays in that national championship game, especially in that fourth quarter. Both of those guys had opportunities to make plays. They didn't make them. That's obviously not going to be a long-term thing. Brooks, he made that great catch against Auburn. Hall, he's got crazy athleticism as well. These guys are going to be a big part of this offense, but I don't know how long it's going to take them to get into a rhythm because, the final game of the season, it was not really pretty.
Yeah, so I'm glad you touched on Brooks and Hall because both those guys, when they came into the program last year, a lot of people were excited about them to see what they could do. They had a very interesting A-Day from both of them, which is the spring game. I think I was more impressed with Brooks. Of course, that Auburn catch was a very phenomenal catch, very important. And Hall, had the drama in the middle of the season where it seemed like he quit the team. He put some stuff on Twitter that was kind of alluding to the fact that he quit the team and then he came back, kind of got back into it. It seemed like he was going to skip practices. That was a little bit of a weird situation. And then in the national championship game, just a little bit disappointing from both of them. I was more disappointed with Hall in the national championship than I was with Ja'Cory Brooks. I think Brooks has a real opportunity here to be the best wide receiver on this roster in the fall. I think he'll get a lot of targets early, especially in the early games. We're going to highlight the schedule a little bit, but there's a big marquee game week 2. I think he might get a lot of targets in that game. I think the potential there is there for Ja'Cory Brooks to step up and be that number one wide receiver. But of course, you pick up a guy like Burton out of the transfer portal, an absolute, really, really sound pickup for Nick Saban. I think he's going to have a great season for Alabama. It's not going to be, like you said, not going to be a Jameson Williams season. It's going to be hard to replicate a season like that for anybody. But I think he's going to have a really strong year. He had a good year at Georgia. And this is a really strong pickup for Nick Saban and kind of balances a wide receiver room that had a ton of question marks this year. If you had to look at anything on the offensive line had a lot of question marks, but the wide receiver room had a ton as well. So picking up a guy like Burton out of the portal, a really smart move. And I really think Ja'Cory Brooks has great potential here to have a big season.
Yeah, as it did last year, too, the receiving core coming into the year had a lot of question marks. Krishawn Holden's a guy we should probably mention because he got more production last year than either of those guys. I think JoJo Earl, another one of those guys, he made some mistakes as well. Had a muffed punt, I believe, against Cincinnati. So late in the year, these guys, especially in the playoffs, did not really step up. Being young, they're incredibly talented, though. I don't have too many question marks compared to like last year, especially now that these guys got some meaningful snaps under their belt. 5 out of the top 6 pass catchers in terms of yards from last year, they're gone. Jaleel Billingsley transfers out. I like Kamla too. 15 yards per catch. He had 8 touchdowns. He was really that go-to receiver in that second half against Georgia. I think he's going to have a really big season. He was very reliable. He only had one game this year, though. We had more than 3 receptions. It was that national title game. So I'm looking to get some more production out of him. Billingsley was obviously very disappointed. He's going to Texas now. 6'5", 250. Big fan of Latu. I think he's got some nice speed after the catch as well.
Yeah, I think Latu, we'll actually see him utilized a lot. I think Bill O'Brien's going to incorporate him into the offense a little bit more this year. Like you said, the national championship, he had his season-high catch there. It really showed that he could be a strong tight end for Alabama. Alabama has a history of relying on the tight end play occasionally, making sure they get into it. And I think Latu has the potential to be a really strong tight end here. And I like that he's coming back. Of course, like you said, Billingsley transferred to Texas, which is a very interesting move from him. I think Latu, he has the right size. He can block. I think he's going to be a good fit for the tight end to be that leading tight end this year, and we can interesting to see where he goes with that.
And, switching gears to the guy who will be throwing him the ball, you don't really need to say much here, but Bryce Young, 47 touchdowns, 4,800 yards. He just shattered the school records. Thought he had a phenomenal season. We don't get a Heisman winner coming back to school very often. I think there's a legit chance Bryce Young wins the Heisman, becomes the second player ever to win it twice. He did everything for this offense. He really carried them. He had 0 rushing yards on the season exactly. Pretty crazy. He didn't do a lot with his legs. It seemed like he was pretty nervous to run at times. But he showed plenty of confidence in the pocket. Early in the year against Texas A&M, he was leading them downfield. They scored a lot of points in that second half. Shredded Georgia, 400-plus yards in that game. Set a school record 2 weeks earlier against Arkansas. The next week had that 98, 99-yard drive against Auburn. I mean, people can say overrated all they want because people love to say that. But it's ridiculous what this kid was able to do on a week-to-week basis, especially late in the year when they needed him to step up. He delivered.
Yeah, I think, like you said, the pocket presence this year, staying in the pocket, completing those passes, especially in the game against that drive against Auburn towards the end, in the game against Arkansas, I was really impressed with his pocket presence and the way he kind of protected himself. That's the question mark with the running. We always, I think a lot of Alabama fans want him to take off in situations. There were a lot of times where it would be like 3rd and 10, and there wouldn't be anyone open. He would hesitate and throw the ball away, or wouldn't go for the 10-yard run that he could easily pick up. I'd like to see him get a couple more carries. But if he does want to protect himself, he's a little nervous. I understand that. I mean, I wouldn't personally want to be doing that, running into some of those stronger defenses. But I think this year he's gonna have another year to work with Bill O'Brien. It seemed like Bill O'Brien might be leaving for the Patriots, but that didn't end up working out. So now he's back in Tuscaloosa. He'll be the offensive coordinator again. The two of them can work together this spring in the practice field and get a little more situated with each other after the full season last year. There's a lot of times where it seemed like Bill O'Brien's play calling was questionable. Now they're going to have another chance to continue to work together and sort of mold the offense perfectly for Bryce Young. And I think he's going to really excel this year. It's hard to beat a Heisman season. Obviously, like you said, back-to-back Heisman is definitely on the table for Bryce Young. He's such a talented player. I think this is going to be a really strong year for him, and the sky's the limit for Bryce Young.
Yeah, one crazy stat before he moved to the defense, they had a 52% third down conversion rate, and their 223 attempts was 3rd in FBS. The two teams ahead of them had 160 or less. That's just pretty insane what they're able to do. Bryce Young, those football IQ really stood out as well. I don't know what kind of improvements we'll see in year 2. It's hard to ask for much, but I got a feeling he's going to really light things up. Should be fun to watch him play this year. Moving to this defense, another one of those reasons I alluded to when we kicked this off. Thought they would get there because of their O-line. I also thought their defense would be a vintage Nick Saban defense. I mean, I was pretty wrong. They're pretty stout against the run, though. After the UF game, they gave up 240-plus yards. If there was more time in that game, Florida would probably beat them. They couldn't stop them. Positioning was a big issue. In the secondary and against the run, Henry Tioto early on in the year, especially in that game, he just could not get a line properly. Missing tackles was a problem at times. He did end the year as the team's leading tackler, though. They really rallied, though, against the run. Phil Mathis, I was kind of like Brian Robinson, very excited. He came back to school, and he was very big in boosting his draft stock. He impressed me as a pass rusher. I know what he could do against the run. 2.6 yards per carry they allowed on the year. That was 4th in FBS. 86 yards per game allowed on the ground. The run game, or the run defense, that is, I think they ended up proving me right in that regard. We'll stick in the front 7 before we get to the secondary. That was very disappointing. But Byron Young, DJ Daylor back. I like Tim Smith. And I also think this pass rushing duo of Will Anderson and Dallas Turner is going to be very scary for the rest of college football.
Yeah, I think a player to highlight, of course, Will Anderson had such a phenomenal season, really strong. And I think Dallas Turner's a player to highlight, a freshman that came in, kind of played a role playing towards the start of the season, then got a couple of starts at the end of the season. I was really impressed with him. I love Dallas Turner's play. I think he's going to have a really strong year. He can have a really big step up year here. And of course, Will Anderson, he's going to dominate again, just like he did last year. I expect him to put up similar numbers. Very impressed with his performance. Bringing back guys like Byron Young is really big pickup for Alabama, kind of keeping that sort of continuity on defense. I think this defense has a really strong potential to be one of the better ones in the last couple of years. Of course, Nick Saban was known for his defense, is known for his defense. But the last couple of seasons, the defense has been outshone by the offense. The offense has been putting up ridiculous numbers. Look at that 2019 team, the 2020 team, even last year to a degree. So I think this year has a real opportunity for this defense to kind of show what they can do. And I think Dallas Turner and Will Anderson will be the two standouts for this defense.
What's crazy about those two is they both have an amazing first step, quick get off. I picked Turner to be the defensive MVP of the national title game because I did pick Alabama to win that game. He ended up having 2 sacks in a limited role. Let's get him some more reps coming off the edge. I can only wonder what numbers he'll put up. Will Anderson had those 33.5 tackles for loss. I think it was 17.5 sacks. For some reason, they didn't get invited to New York. But, yeah, he's a Heisman finalist. I don't care what you say. It's kind of crazy for Alabama. They came up just short in the national championship game. They're getting back 2 Heisman finalists. They just shattered school records pretty much in numerous different categories. Young on offense, Anderson here on defense. Big upside, I think, not just in the front seven, but in the secondary that I just talked about was kind of disappointing. Jalen Moody, another guy linebacker I'm interested to see. I'm glad he stuck around. I think he was in the transfer portal for a bit. He's a veteran there at linebacker. Very interested to see what he does. Back to the defensive secondary, though. Loaded with talent. I also thought the secondary would be the best in football. They weren't. They gave up the 3rd most touchdowns in the conference. They were 7th in yards per game allowed. Josh Jobe is obviously pretty disappointing. What does the secondary need to fix to kind of get back on track? Because the talent is there.
Yeah, I was disappointed with Josh Jobe's performance. I was also disappointed with DeMarco Helms' performance this year. I honestly thought he was going to have a decent year, and then especially that game against A&M, he got beat a bunch of times there, especially that last drive for A&M to get them into field goal range. I was really disappointed with his performance this year. Another guy, Malachi Moore, he had a really interesting, he had a good start to his freshman year. Well, he had a shaky start to his freshman year, and then started picking up towards the end of the season. But this year, he was just invisible.
Right.
Didn't play well at all, and I was really concerned with that. I thought he was going to take the big step up. Didn't see what I needed to see out of him this past season. I'm interested to see how he does this year, in addition to DeMarco Helms and Josh Jobe.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of question marks though.
Yeah, like the positioning in the secondary was a big problem too. Like you said, against A&M, Tennessee, they gave us some big plays. Arkansas, they got throttled by a run first team. KJ Jefferson went through all over them. Traylon Burks could not be held.
Traylon Burks dominated.
Yeah, I mean, it was very disappointing all year long. Like you just said with Malachi Moore, again, I think everybody expected him to have a big-time season. That slot position, I'm very interested to see what they do with Moore and Branch, because Moore, he can play a Minkah Fitzpatrick type of role, I think. He has the skill to do so. Branch, though, he can make a lot of plays as a blitzer there in the slot, and he can cover pretty well also. So I don't really know what they're going to do with that slot position. They got 2 really talented players there that can really move around a good bit. I do think that getting Jordan Battle back, though, he's one of the best safeties in college football, very physical. His PFF grade the last 2 years has been among the top of all the defensive backs. What are you expecting to see out of the safety group? Helms obviously coming back. They're getting 2 seniors in that back end. It's kind of rare when Alabama gets a lot of seniors back, but the last time they did it a couple years ago, they blew everyone out of the water. No one could contain them. I think you're going to sort of probably see something like that this year, getting a lot of seniors back, eager to win a national championship, and it really speaks volumes to get both of their senior safeties back.
Yeah, I think it's going to be definitely a lot of eyes on DeMarco Helms, see how he does this year. Like I said, struggled against A&M, especially against Tennessee and Arkansas. I think Jordan Bell, having him back was huge. That was a massive pickup. There are a lot of question marks whether or not he would come back. Seeing him back is really what you want to see in that state. I think he's going to be kind of a leader on the field. Like you said, a senior. It's very rare to see seniors on defense for Alabama. To have 2 come back in the same position, very strong. I really like that. I really like to see that. I think Jordan Battle will be very, very vocal on the field this year, be a bit of a leader. I'm excited for this. I think DeMarco Helms will have a better season. He was the player outside of Malachi Moore that I was the most disappointed with on defense this year. Malachi Moore was the most disappointed than I'd say DeMarco Helms. I think they both have a really good opportunity this year to play a lot of games and kind of grow their draft stock as well, especially Jordan Battle, and have a stronger season they did last year. And bringing back 2 seniors is great for leadership, and I think Nick Saban's got to be pleased with that.
Kool-Aid McKinstry will likely take over Jalen Armour-Davis' spot, and then Eli Ricks, we'll touch on him. 2 of the top 3 guys that went in the portal come from their rivals in the conference. Pretty crazy. Eli Ricks, though, lockdown corner. His freshman year is highly impressive. I think he had 5 picks that year. Him and Stingley couldn't stay healthy this past season, so obviously that duo, we didn't get to see them really at all. But Ricks, incredibly sticky in man coverage. Interested to see how he does coming over and playing for Alabama. Continues to add to what I think is a very talented defensive back group. I don't know how much better they'll be, because I was very disappointed last year, expecting a big turnaround, because this is going to be one of the focal points of Nick Saban, who's a terrific DB coach. I think these guys are going to be playing lights out this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they'll be lights out as well. Kool-Aid's a big fan favorite in Tuscaloosa. People love him. The name definitely plays into that. I think Kool-Aid's gonna have a big year. Definitely towards the end of the year, this past season, he sort of impressed me a little bit. I had some question marks. I didn't really know what he was gonna be able to do on the field as a freshman, but in the game time he had, I was impressed. And then picking up a guy like Eli Ricks out of the portal, very strong. He had a great year at LSU his freshman year. Of course, like you said, the injuries are their concern. But anytime you take a guy from a rival and the best player in the portal from a rival, that is an absolute massive win for Nick Saban and his staff. I think Eli Ricks is going to have a great year for Alabama, and I'm really excited to see what he can do on the field.
Yeah, this is a very interesting Alabama team. They'll probably be my pick to win the national championship. It just kind of seems like, how can they not? Because a lot of people last year felt that this was probably Nick Saban's worst team he's ever had, and they still almost won a national championship. So to get all these now veterans back, it's going to be a tough team to try and contain on, I think, both sides. Of course, they're losing a lot on defense, though, but this is an area they really reload on, and they're not losing much in the secondary because the guys they do lose were kind of liabilities, I should say. Even though Daniel Wright, I thought, was pretty solid, and Armour Davis did lead the team in picks. I do think they're in a pretty good situation for the future. Anything else you'd like to add to this team before we wrap this up?
I just think that, like I was saying earlier about Malachi Moore, I'm really interested to see what he does. He's the one player I'm going to be watching the most this year. I don't know if you remember his freshman season against A&M at home. He had a bit of a tough game, and then the game against Ole Miss, he struggled. But the second half of that freshman year, the national championship year, I was super impressed. He was my favorite player on the defense. Then last year, I was hoping that he would just take that step and continue to go, and just really disappointed me. So I really want to see how he's going to come out this year and play, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and focus on the schedule a bit, too. We're not going to make any predictions here, but it's an interesting little schedule. They start the year with Utah State. It's not a cakewalk by any means. I mean, this is a good team that won 11 games last year. They'll win it by a couple touchdowns, but it's not an easy game to prepare for Texas the next week at DKR Stadium. Steve Sarkisian, what are you looking forward to most in this game?
Yeah, like you said, Utah State's no cupcake, so that's gonna be a nice way to start the season. Especially very rare that Alabama opens at Bryant-Denny. They normally start in a neutral venue, so I'm very interested to see how that's gonna play into it. Then they travel to Austin. I think it's gonna be a very interesting game. I think it might be a bit of a shootout. I'm interested to see how Texas offense does. We don't really know what they're gonna look like on offense, but I think Alabama's gonna put a ton of points at DKR, and I think Texas will hang around for a decent amount of the game. It's gonna be an interesting affair. I think this is a very strong scheduling from Alabama. Very cool that they're going to go out and play a team on the road, and they're going to welcome Texas back next year. I'm very pleased with Greg Byrne for scheduling a game like this, and this kind of set the tempo for the year. LSU played Texas at Texas in their 2019 national championship season. That was kind of that opening, kind of opened the nation's eyes to LSU. Of course, everyone knows about Alabama; they know this roster, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens on September 10th in Austin.
Yeah, Bijan Robinson, Quinn Ewers, these guys got some superstars on their team. Can't wait for that game to go down. They play at Arkansas October 1st, followed by a home clash with A&M, and then after that at Tennessee. I think that's going to be a really tough three-game stretch. It's really going to define this season, I think. Then they got at LSU November 5th, at Ole Miss after that, and they round the year off of Auburn. But kind of talk about that three-game stretch in October I just talked about.
Yeah, so bringing A&M to Tuscaloosa, I think, is definitely beneficial. It's tough to play at Kyle Field, but going out to Arkansas, that is a very difficult matchup. We don't really know how Arkansas is going to play this year. Though they had a good year last year. It'll be interesting to see how they come out. I don't really know what they're going to look like on offense. And you look at Tennessee. Alabama's beat Tennessee. They haven't lost a game against Tennessee since 2006.
This is going to be a tough game. I think this is going to be a very interesting one.
Yeah, the streak is well noted, but Tennessee wants to beat Alabama more than anything. They want to break that streak. They want to get rid of that curse or whatever you want to call it. And Tennessee has come around under Josh Heupel. They looked impressive at points last year. I think their quarterback play was very impressive. I think they have a really good shot this year to kind of expand that. And on the road, it's going to be loud in Knoxville. They get up for it. It's a rivalry game. This one matters. The third Saturday in October. I'm a little bit worried about that for Alabama for sure. It's going to be a difficult game.
It's obviously going to be contingent on what Tennessee does the weeks leading up to it, but I definitely think if Tennessee can take care of business and they go into this game with maybe 2 losses or less, this is going to be an exciting contest. Can't wait for that one to happen. The schedule is not overly tough. I'd probably give it a B because it's not crazy tough like I just said, but there's the potential for it to be really hard with some of the road games they have. I think this should be a really good year for Alabama. We'll see what happens there. By far, head and shoulders the national championship favorite. Spring practice should be fun. Can't wait for the season. We got a couple months to go. Happy we could jump on here and do this, though. We'll talk about them again, of course, here in the preseason, maybe in August or so as we get ready to kick off the year. But, Nick, I appreciate you joining me. Alabama football.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you as always. I'm looking forward to this year. I think this schedule has a lot of good opportunities for Alabama, and I'm interested to see what they can do on offense and defense.
Yeah, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Nick, appreciate you joining me. I don't know if I just said that, but
thanks as always.
Peace out. Guys, have a good night.